This Drive Time episode from the Zockery team is about what great organisational culture really looks like and what it means for you as a leader who's trying to build something that lasts. Now, before we get into the conversations, I'm proud to share that Zockery is the headline sponsor of the 2026 UK Company Culture Awards. Let me explain why. It's not a logo play, and it's not a brand awareness for brand awareness' sake. We have sponsored these awards because we believe genuinely in everything we do with leadership teams we work with that culture is not separate from your business strategy. Culture is your strategy. The way your people show up, the way decisions get made, the things that get celebrated, the things that get tolerated, the conversations that happen in the corridors versus the ones that happen in the boardroom, all of that determines whether your strategy lives or dies. We work with CEOs and leadership teams every day on turning strategy into execution. And the ones who do it well, without exception, they have cultures that support it. Cultures built on clarity, on trust, on people understanding not just what they're doing, but why it matters. But the organisations who struggle, more often than not, the strategy is fine. It's the culture that gets in the way. Don't Panic Projects have created an awards programme dedicated to celebrating the employers who get this right, who treat their people as the heart of the business, not as a line on a cost sheet. And we really want to be part of that. I was one of the judges of the UK Company Culture Awards for 2026. And I knew I'd find it interesting, however, I didn't expect it to stop me in my tracks. Entry after entry, I read stories of UK organisations who are thinking deeply, really deeply, about what it means to show up for their people. Not with perks for the sake of perks, not with a ping pong table and free fruit, but with intention, with listening, with genuine investment in the things that actually matter to human beings at work. Companies reimagining their workspaces, companies reimagining connection, functionality, care and visibility, companies flattening hierarchies in seating plans and approaches to everyone's wellness, and all being tracked by metrics that show very clearly the wins, the culture wins, not mandated policy enforcing change. So in this episode, we'll hear from some of the winners of 2025 who share what great award-winning culture really looks like and what it means for you as a leader who's trying to build something that lasts. These are the leaders who've lived it, previous winners and a fellow judge sharing what they've seen, what's worked, and what they tell a new leader starting from scratch. So, judging, let me tell you what that was actually like, because I think there's something useful in it for you. When you sit down to read competitive award entries, you expect to see organisations putting their best foot forward, and of course they do. But what struck me is that the entries I kept coming back to, the ones that felt different, weren't the ones with the most impressive statistics. They were the ones that you could feel the thinking behind the decisions. There's a difference between an organisation that has a culture initiative and an organisation that has culture. One is a project, the other is a way of being. The standout entries, the ones that were clearly doing something worth celebrating, shared a few things in common. First, they listened before they acted. They didn't launch the wellbeing programme or redesign the feedback process because someone in leadership thought it was a good idea. They started by asking their people what wasn't working, and then they worked to do something different about the answers. Second, they measured. The best entries weren't just describing what they'd done, they were showing the impact. Retention improved, engagement scores moving. Not to prove something to a judging panel, but because they genuinely cared whether it was working. Third, and this is the one I keep coming back to, they had the courage to be honest about what wasn't working before they fixed it. That kind of honesty takes confidence. It takes a leadership team that's more interested in genuine improvement than simply looking good. If you're a business leader, why does any of this matter? Because the thing I kept seeing in these entries is what we at Zockery talk about every day. Culture isn't something you build once and move on from. It's something you tend to. You listen, you act, you measure, you listen again. And the leaders who do that, who treat culture as a discipline rather than a mood, these are the ones who get to build something that genuinely performs. The companies entering awards like these are doing something brave. They're putting their practices on record and inviting scrutiny. That takes commitment, and it raises the bar for everyone, which is exactly the point. This episode isn't just my voice. As much as I found the judging experience personally moving, what we really wanted was to share the experience of people who have been through this from the inside. So I reached out to winners of 2025 and a fellow judge and asked them a few questions. Let me start with Evoluted. They're a certified B Corp e-commerce agency who were 2025 winners, awarded Business Purpose Before Profit and B Corp Company of the Year. Now, if you listen to our episode on B Corp certification, you'll remember the debate about whether it's worth the investment. Well, here's a company that's living proof it can work, but not in the way that you might expect. I asked Sam Biggins, Managing Director of Evoluted, about their decision to invest in B Corp certification and health and wellness initiatives. What struck me immediately was the order in which things happened for them.
As a service-based business, Evoluted prides itself on its people, and if we have good people who are happy and fulfilled in their work, then that allows us to fulfill our clients' needs and look after them. And by doing that, we retain clients for longer, which makes it a business advantage to how we work. Our B Corp certification came as a result of our culture, not a change to our culture. So I came about because one of our clients, who was a B Corp certified company, believed that we should go and get it because we were already doing the work behind the B Corp. So to us, our B Corp is a sign of the good work our teams are already doing and how they're doing that, and a certification that says we're doing that, rather than going the other way around of saying we want to become a B Corp and then changing our practices and our culture around that. Further down the line, we've had our B Corp now for 3 years. We see it as a really important way to show our commitment to our team and the environment and the well-being of our staff. And it's paid off in terms of the business because clients also see that and want to work with us because they know we're good people to work with.
Did you catch that? Our B Corp certification came as a result of our culture, not a change to our culture. That's the opposite of how most companies approach it. Most companies decide they want B Corp status and then scramble to change their practices to fit the framework. Evoluted was already living those values. A client just pointed out that they should get credit for it. And here's the business case. Happy, fulfilled people deliver better client work. Better client work means longer client retention. Longer client retention is competitive advantage. The culture isn't separate from the commercial model, it is the commercial model. 3 years in, they're using that certification to demonstrate commitment. It's become a signal to both the team and their clients about who they are and how they operate. That's not a HR initiative. That's strategy. Now let's talk about transformation, because sometimes culture change isn't just about tweaking what you're already doing, it's about fundamentally restructuring how your business works. Clean Digital is an employee-owned advertising agency based in Scotland. They won 2 awards in 2025, including Best Culture Transformation Initiative. And when you hear what they did, you'll understand why. I asked Fraser Smith, Chief Strategy Officer at Clean Digital, what makes culture work or fail? How did you decide that employee ownership was a business decision and not a HR initiative?
Becoming employee-owned was definitely a decision that put the long-term stability of the agency at the heart of everything that we do. Funnily enough, the day that we became employee-owned was also the first day of one of our kind of junior team members. And I remember sitting down with them and explaining to them that not only will they be starting out a new job, start with their career, but also at the same time that they've become an owner in the business from the get-go. But our business has changed quite a bit over the last 3 years. We've got now a board of the company rather than just a single shareholder. And also we've got a board of trustee directors who are responsible for looking out for the long-term benefit of the entire team, top to bottom. They have regular catch-ups, and as part of that, the entire team, whether you've been here for 10 years or 6 months, are looking at the long-term vision of the agency and being part of that and having a genuine say in how we run the agency. We're also able to add team benefits, which are not, able that other businesses are not able to necessarily have. Again, there's some new initiatives that we've put in which reward employees, which may be common in other businesses, but the biggest one for us is that after 6 months of eligibility, everyone within the agency is eligible for profit payouts, which I think broadly speaking, we've averaged every 6 months or so. But again, having that, tangible, equitable say and reward of how the business is run and that you truly benefit in the success of the agency is extremely important. I think that salary is great to reward people of the hard work that they do here, but particularly in the world of agencies, when oftentimes you are expected to go above and beyond for your clients to make sure that their both results are being hit, but also that they are heard and seen as a client, and we're looking at kind of growing our client base. That reward is measured in the form of those profit payouts, which has been fantastic to have. It definitely, from my perspective, has that kind of cavalier attitude of all for one for all. We do, even before we can employ and work hard for our clients, but with that extra incentive top to bottom, um, I think is absolutely fantastic. So we've been an employee-owned agency for 3 years now. It's still a relatively short time, and I think will only get better in the years to come.
Fraser described, on day one, a junior team member becomes a business owner, not in some symbolic we value your voice way, in an actual legal profit-sharing ownership way. After 6 months, everyone is eligible for profit payouts, not bonuses tied to individual performance, profit payouts tied to the success of the agency as a whole. So that changes the game. It changes what people optimise for. It changes how they think about client relationships, about going above and beyond, about long-term health of the business. Here's the thing, Fraser said this explicitly. Salary is great, but in agency life you're often expected to go above and beyond. If you're asking your people to do that, profit sharing is how you say, we see you, and when the business wins, you win. But I wanted to know, was there something that they tried that they expected might fail? Because that's the real test of whether culture transformation is just theory or genuine experimentation.
I think there was definitely, sometimes when we thought that, what we're wanting to really achieve out of this would certainly fail. I think that, as soon as someone hears that they're an owner, the concern may have been that, we announced that we're transitioning to being employee owned and everyone would be super excited for a short while, but then kind of go back to business as usual and kind of waiting for, you know, someone at the top of the kind of senior leadership team to, be making kind of every decision across the business. And I don't think that's necessarily, been the case. I think that our approach to things has been being as transparent and democratic as possible, to avoid, our team feeling like the transition has been more of a bottleneck rather than, necessarily a fuel source. I think as well, like, as soon as you become an owner to people, again, there's some things that in other businesses that, people might not necessarily, want or need to know in terms of, financial transparency. But, we've looked to kind of be mindful of that, and, legitimately, share data on, margins and overheads, profits, so that there is complete transparency of how we're doing as a business, and also subsequently, again, when it comes down to profit, that is directly paid out to our team. So I think that definitely it's not necessarily an easy, process where suddenly you just decide to become employee owned. There is like steps that from that culture perspective that you have to put in place. Otherwise, the team won't feel as if they're truly owners, or truly have a say in how things are run. And without us putting them in place, and having that transparency across the team, we could certainly fail.
The risk they identified was real. People would be excited about ownership for a week and then default back to waiting for someone at the top to make all the decisions. So how did they avoid that? Transparency. Radical financial transparency. They share margins, they share overheads, they share profits. Not in a sanitised annual report. They share the actual numbers that determine how the business is doing and how profit payments get calculated. That's uncomfortable for a lot of leaders, but Fraser's point is critical. If you tell people they're the owners, but don't give them the information that owners need to make good decisions, you're not actually giving them ownership, you're giving them a title. 3 years in, they're still learning, but the structural foundations they've built, that's the culture work that lasts. Let's shift out to something more foundational, because before you can think about profit sharing or B Corp certification or any of the structural changes we've been talking about, you need clarity on what you stand for. At Zockery, we believe that culture directly underpins business strategy. So when I spoke with Justin Deaville, Managing Director of Receptional, a marketing agency that won multiple awards at the 2025 UK Culture Awards, I asked him directly, what does culture mean to your company and how does it underpin strategy?
There's that famous quotation by Peter Drucker, a management guru, in which he says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I feel there's a lot of value in that, in the sense that it doesn't matter how strong your plans are, it's about the culture and behaviour within your business that determines whether those plans are lived and delivered. And at Receptional, we think a lot about our values. So we've got these 5 values that we try to live by, which are transparent, forward-thinking, dynamic, collaborative, and curious. And we try to make sure that they shape everything we do. So our culture, our decision-making, the interactions we have with each other every day, we try to hire people who embody those values. And I think I find them particularly useful for giving feedback, because you can always tie feedback into those values. So, if someone is presenting a client report and it's a bit opaque, it doesn't follow our value of being transparent. If we're not thinking about kind of how we can help our clients in the future, that's not forward thinking. We need to be thinking outside the box in terms of the different solutions that we have for them. So there's lots of different ways in which we can talk about our values and how we share them with the rest of the business.
Culture eats strategy for breakfast. You've probably heard that Peter Drucker quote before, but listen to how Justin applies it. He's not saying strategy doesn't matter. He's saying that no matter how strong your plan is, it's the culture and behaviour within your business that determines whether that plan gets lived and delivered. And here's the part that made me sit up. Justin uses their 5 values, transparent, forward-thinking, dynamic, collaborative, curious, as a feedback tool. If a client report is opaque, that's not just a quality issue, it's a violation of their transparency value. If they're not thinking about future solutions for clients, that's not forward-thinking. Values becomes the language for daily coaching, not aspirational posters on the wall, actual usable criteria for whether work is meeting the standard. That's culture as discipline. But I wanted to know what this looks like in practice, because values are one thing, implementation is another. So I asked Justin, what does this mean day to day? What changes to the employee experience and ways of working that actually make these values real?
We try to hire based upon our values. And everyone says that, of course, but we find that if we can get those values right and reinforce them, then that helps kind of in terms of the culture of the business. And so what we've introduced recently is a structured 30, 60, 90-day onboarding plan, which I think is quite common, but also making sure that we're kind of checking in on those dates, that there's training happening throughout that period, and we're checking in regularly with a new hire. And we've actually shortened our probation period, which used to be longer, to make sure that we're really focused on making sure that that's the right employee for us within that first period, and they're getting the attention and training and support that they need, so they become embedded and part of the team more quickly. And obviously we've got collaboration tools that we use across the business, which is around transparency and sharing information. So we now all work on Monday.com, the project management tool, which again is is fairly commonplace, but we also have Fathom, which is our AI note-taking tool, which I think has been fantastic in terms of helping to share information more widely, not just amongst the team, but also with clients. And we're able to kind of run AI across the transcripts of those to make sure we're picking up on kind of conversations and important points that we need to follow up on. And then, of course, there's the other stuff that we do around team bonding, making sure that we're kind of regularly seeing each other face to face and doing stuff that's fun and getting to know each other. I think increasingly with remote working, then that's an issue, is that people don't know each other. They don't spend as much time with each other as they did in the past. And those events really kind of are markers within the year when we get together and make sure that we're kind of getting to know our colleagues. And I think particularly in a business like ours, when you're often working with a new client, you need to trust each other enough to be able to kind of work together and then to be able to build bonds of trust with the client. And then I think there's also kind of that piece around flexible working. We do work with more remote workers than we've ever had before, but also supporting that work-life balance while making sure that we maintain productivity and that we've got a culture that's strong with a good element of challenge. It's not about everybody, I used to think it was about making everybody happy the whole time, but it's not at all. It's about having enough challenge to keep work interesting and entertaining, and so that we're all developing.
So let's break down what Justin just described, because there's a lot in there. First, structured onboarding, 30, 60, 90 days with check-ins at each milestone. They've shortened the probation period, not to give people less time, but to force themselves to be more intentional about embedding new hires quickly. That's values-led hiring in action. Second, transparency through tools. They use a project management tool, which is common, but they also use an AI note-taking tool to capture and share meeting insights, not just internally, but with clients. So that's the transparency value showing up in the tech stack. Third, trust through in-person connection. In a remote-first world, they're deliberate about face-to-face time, not because remote work doesn't work, but because trust is harder to build over digital communication channels. And in a client service business, internal trust determines how you build client trust. And here's the line that stuck with me. It's not about making everybody happy the whole time. It's about having enough challenge to keep work interesting and entertaining so that we're all developing. That's mature culture thinking, not about perks or comfort, about growth, challenge and development. That's how you build a culture that performs, not just a culture that feels good. So we've heard from companies who have lived it, who have built cultures that win awards, that drive business results and make people want to stay. But what if you're just starting? What if you're a new CEO or leader who's inherited a team and you know that culture matters, but you genuinely don't know where to begin? I asked Tom Kogote, a fellow judge of the 2026 UK Company Culture Awards and someone who's advised dozens of leadership teams on culture transformation, this very question. What would you tell a business leader or new CEO who knows culture matters but doesn't know where to start? What he's shared is a playbook, so I'm going to let him speak and then I'll pull out the key points for you to remember.
Well, my first thing I would say is that culture has already started without you. So it's about getting in and understanding the culture that's already happening within the organization. Now, the moment you walk in as a new CEO, people are going to be reading you. They're going to be looking at what you pay attention to, what are the things you tolerate, who are the people you promote, because that all sets the culture. So think about that culture forming in real time. You need to go and find ways to embed into the existing way the organization is operating. Like the first 90 days, that looks like going to things and going to places that you wouldn't be expected to be seen. So, you know, the Friday drinks, if they're having them in the team, they're turning up at the team canteen to get to know each other. Things that you wouldn't typically be invited to as the CEO. By going along to them signals that you are sensing and understanding and wanting to understand what the organization is like, feels like, and is the culture there that people are wanting to experience. So it's an opportunity for you to really kind of get the richest data that you'll ever get from your people just by being out with them. And once you've listened and once you've seen and heard what people are telling you the organization is like, you can then start to look across to what you're actually seeing. So what's the lived experience that you're seeing? And actually you can see, is there potentially a gap through what people are saying versus what you're seeing, what you're experiencing, what other people are experiencing and telling you. So using the data that you've heard from your time out and about with the teams is a great opportunity to be able to identify that kind of culture gap. And if there is an opportunity for you to name that culture gap, then even better. So you can name it, build trust with the team. You don't need to fix it. And actually the best opportunity that you have is to bring people in to co-create what comes next. But it starts to be something that's symbolic, that shows the way that you want to operate, the way that you value the culture within the organization. So that's, I think, a great opportunity. When it comes to those things that you find, think about how there could be opportunities around how decisions get made or how meetings get done. There can be some really easy ways to change the culture of an organization simply by making some improvements to the ways of working. And actually, by being new into that role, you have a prime opportunity to use that to your advantage, to ask the curious questions and start to understand how things are now versus how you want to shape those things to be in the future. I think the other thing that is a really critical point which many CEOs can get wrong, is actually to think about how you treat the culture completely and utterly interlinked with the strategy, rather than keeping it separate, rather than the culture being an HR thing or a people team project. Thinking about how you can integrate fully the strategy to the culture, because to deliver the strategy that you have, that you need, and ensure it gets delivered, the culture needs to enable that. The culture needs to enable people to think in ways that's going to enable you to unlock their potential, but also create the opportunity to do the things in the right way as well. So think about how that strategy gets delivered, how it's linked to the culture. Are you tolerating and how are you creating the right conditions for people to thrive, and the right leadership capability amongst your leadership team to enable them to thrive as well. So I guess if you're a CEO thinking about this and you know culture matters, you don't know where to start, my top tips are: start by listening, name what you see, and then pick something to move on quickly. That momentum shows all of your teams exactly how much culture means to you. The other key thing is to bring people in on that journey in co-creating what's next. So identify and then co-create and activate are my top tips for creating a culture that you can be proud of and that your teams want to come to work every day.
Okay, let's distill that, because Tom provided a roadmap. First, the culture has already started without you. The moment you walk in as a new leader, people are reading you. What you pay attention to, what you tolerate, who you promote. That's the culture forming in real time. You don't get to start from scratch. You get to influence what's already there. Second, listen first. Spend your first 90 days going places that you wouldn't typically be invited. Friday drinks, the canteen, team meetings that you might normally skip. That's where you'll get the richest data. Not from surveys, but by being with your people. Third, name the gap. Once you've listened, look for the difference between what people say and what you see. What's the lived experience versus the stated experience? If you can name that gap, even if you can't fix it immediately, you build trust. Fourth, co-create. Don't fix culture alone. Bring people in to co-create what comes next. That's symbolic of how you want to operate. It shows you value input, not just compliance. Fifth, make quick improvements to ways of working. You don't need a 12-month transformation plan. Change how decisions get made. Change how meetings get done. Small shifts in process can change culture fast. Sixth, link culture to strategy. This isn't a HR project. Culture enables strategy. If your strategy requires innovation, your culture needs to reward curiosity and tolerate failure. If your strategy requires execution, your culture needs clarity and accountability. They're not separate. And finally, show momentum. Pick something, name it, act on it, and show your teams exactly how much culture means to you. Tom's summary: listen, identify, co-create, activate. That's your playbook. Before we close, I want to acknowledge something important. The shortlist for this year's UK Company Culture Awards was announced on Friday the 20th of March, and I'd like to congratulate all those who entered and all those who were shortlisted. Entering an award like this is an act of courage. You're putting your practices on record, you're inviting scrutiny, and you're saying publicly that culture matters to you, not just a nice to have, but as a core part of how you operate. The awards event will take place on the 7th of May in London, and good luck to everyone. If you're listening and you're inspired by what you've heard here, I'd encourage you to attend. Meet the leaders who are proudly leading the charge. I want to close by coming back to something I said at the start. Culture is not separate from strategy. It's not the nice to have that happens after you've sorted the commercial stuff. The companies I read about in that judging process, the ones that stopped me, that made me sit back and think, they weren't doing culture as a side project. They were doing it as leadership, as discipline, as genuine commitment to the people that make their business work. And the results speak for themselves, not because culture is soft, because culture is the soil that everything else grows in. If you're a leader listening to this and you're still figuring out where culture sits on your priority list, I'd say it's not on the list. It's above, below, and all around it. Everything you're trying to do, strategy, growth, execution, team alignment, all of it will be easier or harder depending on the culture you're building or inheriting right now. Listen to your people, be honest about what isn't working, measure what matters, and have the courage to change what isn't serving anyone. That's what the best organisations in the UK are doing, and that's what I hope this episode gives you inspiration to do. I'm Collette Easton. This has been a Drive Time episode from the Zockery team.